When Les Paul's kids opened his vault after his death, they couldn't believe their eyes. Inside was a fortune so immense that it brought them to tears: priceless guitars, million-dollar patents, and royalty checks that never stopped coming. But that was just the beginning of the story. What followed was a saga of family feuds, record-breaking auctions, and a legacy built from one of music's biggest fortunes. This incredible journey all began with a $5 contract and a restless boy who saw possibilities in everything around him. Les Paul was born Lester William Pulsfuss on June 9, 1915, in Waukesha, Wisconsin. His family had German roots. His mother Evelyn had connections to the Milwaukee brewing industry and the Stutz automobile makers, while his father George ran a garage where young Lester spent countless hours collecting spare parts. From a young age, Lester had a curious mind that never stopped working. He saw the world differently, often breaking things apart just to see how they worked. Even the wooden staircase in their house became one of his early experiments. He trimmed the steps to alter their pitch, turning them into a musical instrument. His mother, though frustrated by the damage, recognized his cleverness. When his parents divorced, Evelyn decided to shorten their last name from Pulsfuss to Paul, hoping to avoid anti-German sentiment during World War I. Lester never legally changed his name, but he started using the name Les Paul later in life. By the age of 5, he was already performing at Rotary Club meetings, standing on tables and singing How You Gonna Keep Him Down on the Farm. A music teacher once told his mother, "Your boy will never learn music," but that only fueled his determination. At 8, he took apart a harmonica to understand how it worked, then put it back together and taught himself to play. By 9, he had built his first radio, pulling sound from the air through an antenna strung between trees. At 10, wanting to play both guitar and harmonica at the same time, he invented a hands-free harmonica holder using a wire coat hanger and scraps of wood. His brother, who worked at a dry cleaner, brought home extra hangers that Les turned into endless prototypes. By the time he was 12, he was playing guitar at a drive-in restaurant when someone in the crowd called out, "Red, your guitar's not loud enough." That challenge sparked his first experiment with amplifying sound. He rigged his mother's telephone mouthpiece to a radio speaker and jammed a phonograph needle into his guitar's bridge, wiring it to the radio's amplifier. The sound was rough and full of feedback, but something about it worked. It was the first step toward creating the electric guitar. By 13, Les was performing at roadhouses under the name Red Hot Red, earning $5 a night, good money at the time. At 15, he created 2 stage names. As Rhubarb Red, he played country music on St. Louis radio, and as Les Paul, he performed jazz in Chicago clubs. He switched between the two depending on the crowd, always experimenting, always searching for something new. At 17, he left school to go on tour, playing with Rube Tronson's Texas Cowboys and later joining Sonny Joe Wolverton's band. His big break came at Beekman's Barbecue back home, where he played guitar for tips while a tin bucket sat beside him. Some nights, he made $14, enough to buy more radio parts. To Les, music and invention were never separate, they worked together. When he moved to Chicago in 1934, everything started falling into place. He played at the Chicago World's Fair, a massive event that introduced him to audiences unlike any he'd ever seen. He landed radio gigs that would shape his future, hosting shows on WBBM in Chicago and WJRN in Racine. During the day, he played country music as Rhubarb Red, but at night, he stepped into the world of jazz, performing alongside some of the greatest musicians of all time. He jammed with legends like Art Tatum and Django Reinhardt, soaking up their techniques and blending them into his own unique style. In 1941, Les made one of his greatest breakthroughs. Frustrated by the limitations of hollow body guitars, which amplified not only the music but every vibration and bit of feedback, he built something no one had ever seen before, a solid-body electric guitar. He called it the Log. It was just a 4x4 piece of wood with a guitar neck and pickups attached, but it produced pure, controlled sound with endless sustain. To make it look less strange, he bolted the sides of an old Epiphone hollow body onto it, but those were purely cosmetic. The real power was in the solid wood core. In 1943, Les moved to Los Angeles, where Bing Crosby encouraged him to set up a home recording studio. He turned his garage into a creative laboratory, building his own recording tools and experimenting with multi-track recording. Over the next 2 years, he developed techniques like sound-on-sound recording, overdubbing, and speed manipulation, techniques that would revolutionize the music industry. In 1948, his song Lover featured 8 layers of guitar, all played by him. Columbia Records rejected it, but Capitol Records saw its potential. When it was released, the song became a hit, shocking the industry with its innovative sound. Disaster struck that same year when Les was in a car crash that shattered his right arm and elbow. Doctors told him they would need to amputate, but he refused, convincing them to set his arm at a permanent angle so he could still play guitar. During his year-long recovery, he mapped out new ideas for recording, perfecting techniques in his mind before he could apply them in the studio. In 1945, he met Mary Ford, a singer with a voice that could turn any melody into something special. They married in 1949, becoming one of the biggest musical acts of the 1950s. Between 1950 and 1957, they had 28 charting hits, including How High the Moon and Vaya con Dios. Their innovative sound combined Les's layered guitar arrangements with Mary's harmonized vocals, creating something orchestral and entirely new. They recorded in makeshift studios, garages, hotel rooms, even a custom-built echo chamber carved into the rock beneath their New Jersey home. Les's endless experiments led to groundbreaking inventions like the Les Pulverizer, a device that allowed him to trigger pre-recorded tracks during live performances, making it sound like a full band was on stage. In 1952, Gibson partnered with Les to create the Gibson Les Paul guitar, a solid-body electric guitar that would become one of the most iconic instruments in music history. Les Paul's legacy is not just in the guitars that bear his name or the music he made, it's in the way he changed how music was created. His restless innovation paved the way for modern recording techniques and shaped the sound of countless artists who followed. The fortune he left behind was built not just on talent, but on a lifetime of seeing possibilities where others saw limits. His story is a testament to the power of imagination, determination, and the belief that anything is possible if you're willing to take it apart and build it again. Sure. Here's the entire text in paragraph format without skipping any words. The combination that gave it a warm, rich tone with incredible sustain. Les wanted the guitar to stand out, so he suggested a gold finish. The result was the now famous Gold Top, a guitar that looked as bold as it sounded. On May 20, 1952, the first two production models were shipped to Les Paul. A month later, he played them on stage at the Paramount Theater in New York, introducing the world to Gibson's newest creation. The official launch followed in July at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. This wasn't just a product release, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Les Paul and his wife Mary Ford made sure the guitar was seen and heard everywhere they performed. Les wasn't just endorsing it, he was proving its potential every time he played. Financially, this deal was just as groundbreaking. Les Paul received royalties on every guitar sold and held patent rights for certain design elements, including the unique wrap-over bridge. But not everything about the first model was perfect. The original tailpiece, designed by Gibson's Ted McCarthy, made it difficult for players to bend strings easily. Some found it frustrating. Over the next few years, Gibson kept improving the design, replacing the original bridge with a more advanced Tunatic system in 1955. This small change made a huge difference, allowing players to adjust their intonation with precision. Despite its bold design and Les Paul's influence, the guitar struggled to compete. Fender's Telecaster and Stratocaster were lighter, more affordable, and had a sleek, modern look. Many guitarists felt the Les Paul was too heavy and old-fashioned. By 1960, sales had dropped so much that Gibson decided to discontinue the original single cutaway model. They introduced a new version with a thinner body and double cutaways, calling it the SG. At first, they kept the Les Paul name on it, but Les himself wasn't a fan of the new design. By 1963, he asked Gibson to remove his name from the model. Just as it seemed like the original Les Paul was fading away, something unexpected happened. In 1964, Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones started playing a Sunburst Les Paul standard on stage. Other guitarists took notice. Soon, Eric Clapton was using one for his legendary recordings with John Mayall and the Bluesbreakers. Mike Bloomfield followed, along with a growing wave of blues and rock musicians who fell in love with the guitar's thick, powerful tone. Gibson saw the shift and made a bold decision. In 1968, they reintroduced the original Les Paul design. This time, it wasn't just another guitar, it was a symbol of rock music's growing power. By the 1970s, legends like Jimmy Page, Pete Townsend, and Slash had cemented the Les Paul's place in music history. The guitars that had once struggled to sell became some of the most valuable instruments ever made. Today, Early models from 1958 to 1960 are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, turning what was once considered a failure into one of the most sought-after guitars of all time. Les Paul and Mary Ford were once the perfect musical team. On stage, they made magic together. Off stage, their marriage was falling apart. They had been together since 1949, but by the early 1960s, their relationship had turned into something bitter and painful. In 1963, Les Paul filed for divorce, accusing Mary Ford of being unfaithful. He claimed she had affairs with several men, including singer Foy Willing and a contractor named Donald Hatfield. He also said she neglected their children and humiliated him by openly bragging about her relationships. What had started as a love story filled with music ended in heartbreak and scandal. After the divorce, Les Paul stepped away from performing. Losing Mary Ford wasn't just the end of his marriage, it was the end of his musical partnership. Without her, something felt missing. He also knew the music industry was changing. Rock and roll had taken over, and his style of music was no longer at the center of it all. Rather than trying to compete with a new wave of artists, he turned his focus to something he had always loved: innovation. Les Paul had never been just a musician, he was an inventor, always searching for ways to push sound further. During this time, he created something called the Pulverizer, a device that let musicians control pre-recorded sounds directly from their instruments. His experiments in the studio laid the foundation for recording techniques that would shape modern music. Even though he wasn't performing, he was still changing the industry in ways most people didn't even realize. But while he was creating new technology, his body was failing him. Years of playing guitar had taken a toll. Arthritis made it harder to move his fingers. Hearing loss made it difficult to even listen to the music he loved. For many musicians, this would have been the end. For Les Paul, it was just another challenge to work around. He changed the way he played to fit his limitations, finding new techniques that allowed him to keep making music in his own way. Though he stayed away from the stage for years, he never fully disappeared. In 1976 and 1978, he teamed up with legendary guitarist Chet Atkins to record Chester and Lester and Guitar Monsters. These albums reminded the world of his genius. Even without constant performances, he was still proving why he was one of the greatest musicians of all time. Then something unexpected happened. In the late 1980s, Les Paul decided to return to live music. By this time, he was in his 70s, an age when most musicians had long since retired. But instead of slowing down, he started playing weekly shows at New York City's Iridium Jazz Club in 1995. Every Monday night, people packed the venue to watch him play. Fans, musicians, and even celebrities came to see the man who had changed music forever. In 1988, he received one of the highest honors in music. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, standing alongside legends like the Beatles and Bob Dylan. The ceremony was held at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, and the moment was unforgettable. Jeff Beck, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, had the privilege of inducting him on stage. Beck admitted something that many already knew: he had learned so much from Les Paul. His playing, his techniques, even the way he thought about the guitar had been shaped by Paul's influence. It was a moment of pure respect, a reminder that Les Paul's impact stretched far beyond his own music. Almost 2 decades later, he proved once again that his influence had no expiration date. In 2006, at the age of 90, he won 2 Grammy Awards. His album Les Paul and Friends, American Made, World Played was more than just a collection of songs. It was a celebration of his legacy, featuring collaborations with artists like Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Keith Richards, and Sting. The Grammys he won that night were for Best Pop Instrumental Performance for Caravan and Best Rock Instrumental Performance for 69 Freedom Special. It was incredible to see a man who had shaped music decades ago still winning major awards, still proving that his sound was timeless. His recognition wasn't just limited to music. In 2005, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame, honoring both his artistic talent and his technical genius. His contributions to music technology changed everything. His early prototype for a solid-body electric guitar, known as the Log, became the blueprint for modern electric guitars, including the famous Gibson Les Paul. His work in multi-track recording changed the way music was made, allowing artists to layer different sounds with precision. These weren't just small improvements, they were innovations that shaped the entire industry. Even in his final years, Les Paul never stopped doing what he loved. Every week, he performed at New York's Iridium Jazz Club, playing his guitar and sharing stories with the audience. In 2007, he was awarded the National Medal of Arts by President George W. Bush, another sign of just how much he had contributed to music and culture. Documentaries like Les Paul, Chasing Sound captured his extraordinary life, showing how his curiosity and determination had shaped an entire era of music. On August 12, 2009, he passed away at the age of 94 due to complications from pneumonia. But his legacy was already written into history. Musicians around the world paid tribute to him. Slash called him vibrant and full of positive energy. The Edge from U2 said that rock music as we know it wouldn't exist without him. He was laid to rest in his hometown of Waukesha, Wisconsin, where fans continue to honor his memory through exhibits like the Les Paul Experience. But his influence didn't end when he passed away.